Well, our guest today on Absolutely Famous is Chiefs Super Rugby team manager Marty Verco. Marty, welcome, mate, and boy, your team is going so well.
Yeah, no, obviously pleasing results, probably the last three results after a bit of a hiccup in New Plymouth. So, yeah, really proud of how the boys performed the week after the game in New Plymouth and the week in Hamilton against the Hurricanes. You know, it's always hard coming off a loss to recalibrate and make sure, you put a performance in, and it wasn't perfect. The conditions certainly weren't perfect. And then, yeah, obviously a pressure cooker going over to Canberra. Apart from nearly getting frostbite, it was a really positive experience. And then, yeah, it was great to mix the squad up a bit, and those guys coming in play well against the Force, who are a very handy outfit as well.
Yeah, I was listening to an Aussie rugby program between the posts yesterday, and they were just gobsmacked by how well your boys played with 11 changes. And I think what really illustrated how much depth you've got is Ramika Poihipi shifting from the midfield to first five and doing the goal kicking like he plays there every week.
Yeah, I mean, Rams he's a mentally really strong player, in person. Right from when he got named, you could just see that steel and that determination that he was ready to be, QB1, the leader of that team. And I think he really, enjoyed that extra responsibility. And right from the Sunday, Monday that we got into Perth, he just led that group really well. And I suppose his performance reflected that on the weekend.
Yeah, well, you must be pretty proud of the boys. I mean, there's obviously you're doing things right for your virtual second team to come in and play like the first team. Yeah, that's something to be pretty proud of, I would suggest.
Yeah, I suppose it reflects, the personalities and the values that the players have, that they don't want to let anybody down. So, that is a good thing. It's funny, you can feel like you can go from hero to zero in a week. Like we weren't in a great space after our Reds loss, so we know that can happen, and we know that if we don't get to where we want to get to this season, that it's going to be pretty tough. So, both us and the Reds are on 0 points now, and I think that's one thing that we're not listening to the white noise. We're not listening to anybody else, but what happens in our four walls. So, we're not taking anything for granted. Like, we've got a massive game on the weekend. It's our final. We've got three finals hopefully to play, but the biggest final's the one that's ahead of you, and that's the one on Saturday night.
Yeah, it was great to see one of our fellow Marlborough boys, Atu Moli, back in action in the weekend too. How's Atu travelling?
Yeah, really well. As you know, and probably a lot of your viewers, he's a superhuman. He's got a young family now, little Sione, a great wife, and I'm proud of him every day. It's actually really nice having him and guys like Nank, who's regularly on the show around at Chiefs HQ. He's had a tough year, a tough couple of years with injuries, but it's testament to him that he was back on the field. He's very popular with his peers in our setup. So, when his name's called out to play, there's a special cheer. He did a great job, got around the field and trained really well. So he'll be right in the mixer for playoffs as well.
Good stuff. Another guy I'm wondering about, Josh Lord, the hugely talented young lock. He's been beset by injuries. What's his status at the moment?
Yeah, Lordy, obviously, I think I've said it on this program, did an amazing job to RTP to get back after his knee injury last year. Again, top human. His work ethic can't be underestimated as well. It was difficult for him, I think, getting ahead not quite early into that Reds game. After all that time he'd spent to get back, but I believe he's available again. It's hard. He wasn't in Australia, but put the yards in here. So he's like me. The boys ready for selection for this weekend.
Great news during the week for the club, Marty, with Clayton McMillan and two assistants, Dave Hill and Roger Randall, locked in for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, the rascals, all three of them, especially the two assistant coaches. So, on Monday mornings, if we've won, I tend to go down and get them a coffee and a sausage roll for morning tea. So the food bill will remain high, but Chiefs HQ for about 3 years, I suppose. But no, they're really good people. I mean, obviously, Hilly, personally knowing him so well, it's great, selfishly to have that cheeky smile. I call him Benjamin Button because he looks the same as he did when he was 18. Roger's a great attack coach. And I think Hilly's really, now he's got that defence portfolio for a couple of years now. Does a great job, and I can't speak highly enough for Clayton. He's a magnificent head coach, person, and just leader of men. So we're very lucky. We're probably one franchise that won't have a lot of change over the off season. So we're pretty happy about that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say about Clayton McMillan, he's got a certain presence, or mana as we call it, about him, hasn't he? He just oozes it to me when I look at how he operates.
Yeah, he very down to earth. I think he leads really well when we maybe need a little bit of a pickup as well. Like, I was really impressed with his leadership after the Reds loss, and probably a little bit was made of his reactions during the Hurricanes game, but that's just reflective on him knowing how important that game was. His rugby maturity is really high in intel, and he just knew that was a massive game for us, and that's why there'll be no complacency from our end, and there'll be a performance hopefully that reflects that this weekend because of the type of coach he is.
And Davey Hill, of course, our mate, doing a wonderful job with the defence, and defence is a lot about attitude too, isn't it, as well as technique. So you can't coach the attitude, but the boys just look as though they would die for each other.
Yeah. I think there was probably there might have been 40 of us over in Canberra, and I think if we rank from happiness to grumpiness, I think 41st was Mr. D Hill on after that Brumbies game, because we let a couple of late tries in. He wasn't satisfied, and that I think probably sums up where he's at. He's expecting excellence in that area, and you're 100% right. Like, going back to my days, even when I coached the Marlborough Boys College first 15, one of the things we used to think about was, where your defence normally ranked where you were on the table. And I think that reflects that. Like the Crusaders are just behind us with defensive stats. So, as I said before, we've just got to keep that defensive mentality, get our heads in the spokes, and you don't want to give the opposition too much ball, because we've made a lot of tackles, over 500 tackles in the last 2 games. We don't want to keep doing that. We've got to look after the ball, but when it's time to defend, that's when you've got to have that mentality, that siege mentality.
Did you enjoy the experience in Perth? I mean, Tony Lewis, your old CEO, of course, boss of the Western Force. Now, that result would have hurt him, but overall, what did you think? I thought the crowd was pretty good.
Yeah, it's amazing how many expats and Chiefs supporters. Like, we had a lot of interest during the week to even have an open training run, which we would love to do, but we don't do that. Well, no real super teams do that at certain times of the year, so we didn't want to disrespect, like, for example, our playing group for that week, or underestimate the challenge the Force would have. I think that's why I think we really, really focused on the game in Canberra so much, and we were worried about having to go to the Western Force and get a result. That's how much we respected both those teams we played in Australia. They're definitely on the up, and you've got to feel a bit sorry for them about the result and where they're at, because they would have so high hopes to make those quarters. And we've all been there before. We've all had those sort of days where things just don't quite click. I thought their bench was superb. They've got a lot of good players, young players there. They've got a really good coaching and management group. They've got a great CEO. They'll be fine. They'll get results, and that will be a bit like maybe Suva and Lautoka. It will be a real place you don't want to go and play. That's Perth. So they've got a great setup. They'll be fine. They're a great crowd. They've got great support. It's going to happen for them at some stage. It just didn't happen that day.
Yeah, they're the Aussie team I'm cheering for, that's for sure. He didn't play on the weekend, but Damien McKenzie, he just seems to me to have added that X factor bit you might have been lacking in that position previously.
Yeah. I think he gives our team a lot of confidence. He's a leader without being, the sort of surly, stoic leader of Sam Cane or even Brodie Retallick, but he is a leader. And it sounds, that I'm saying everybody's a great human, but, he is a very good person, as well as a rugby player, very down to earth. The amount of, stuff he does off the field for people that maybe need to pick me up, and people in our society that are struggling a bit. He was outside signing autographs in Perth 40 minutes after the game. The last chief out there, and he didn't play. And that reflects what type of person he is. He worked really hard. He was our water boy / message man on the weekend, but worked hard all week because we had a lot of players over there for the week, to set us up for the quarterfinal and to prep our team that played on the weekend. So that sort of sums up what type of person he is. And I expect he'll be a type of guy that will put his hand up in the next few weeks, hopefully. Obviously just 1 week we're focused on, but if we're moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. He's tough as old boots too, isn't he? Doesn't mind mixing it.
Yeah, well, I think it sort of flew under the radar that maybe, he played a lot of minutes. He played every game leading into that game in Perth. He wasn't scheduled to play the Rebels round 4, but there was a bereavement in one of our players' families, so he stepped in at the last minute. And, even then, saying, this has happened, he was like, right, got the boots, let's go, There was no, I really want to game off. He just loves playing footy, and he gets banged a few times, People are after him, but
I know.
Yeah, pick up the champ.
Yeah, he's a champion, all right. As manager, Marty, you must be flat out. I mean, give us a typical, say, week for you, starting from after the match. What do you do? What's your job then?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm really lucky. I've got a really good staff around me, and they do a lot of work as well, including my assistant manager. So, like after a game, a lot of the gear and that sort of stuff, he would normally do. Um, for me, it probably depends on what the next week looks like. So, if we've got an away game, for example, it's all about setting up that next week and what we need to do to make sure that we're the best we can be the next week. So it's making sure, all our training facility, all our week schedule is what we want it to be. So that would be, checking the availability of players after mid-clinic on that day after the game. And then we have a management meeting the night after the game to set up our week, to basically go over, what's our plan for the week, how we're going to get these guys up, both mentally and physically. And there's people, there's staff within that will do their jobs to make sure that happens. But it's probably just making sure everybody's communicating with each other to make sure that happens. And then, I mean, you could, without sounding too full on or arrogant, there's so many things that I could mention that happen in a week.
Yeah.
Where basically my role is about making sure everybody's communicating together and everything's ready. All the resources are there for both players and management, to nail their roles and be the best they can be. Whether that be travel, logistics, communication about, people coming in, commercial stuff. I work with our commercial staff to make sure that the type of commercial things we're doing are beneficial for both commercial and our players. So they're not too, weighed one way. And then travel logistics is a big thing. It's funny, as my week goes on, my workload gets less. That probably doesn't make sense, but it does. And really on game day, a lot of my stuff, especially with the staff around me, will do all the kit and all that type of stuff, is basically communicating with players and making sure they're on time, and then, making subs and all that type of stuff. And then making a wee speech to our whānau if we're at home, basically, and any milestones. That's really my week.
Brilliant. I guess it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster. I mean, it is for the fans, so I guess it's the same for you, although you try and keep it business, but it's more than business, isn't it?
Yeah, I probably miss a little bit of the emotion. I remember early days at Tasman, being nervous for the odd game. I remember, maybe year 1 or 2, we went up to New Plymouth and it was a big crowd for our grand final. And I remember, a couple of years later on my first World Cup final, in the bus, actually being really nervous. And then, we've played a couple of big games like a Super Rugby final a couple of years ago and a big game last year in a Super Rugby semi-final last year, big games against Crusaders. You sort of miss. I don't really get nervous anymore, because I've got to work emotionless a little bit on what I'm doing. So maybe I'm just getting old and not. Yeah, you still enjoy it. Like, you still, this is going to be a cool game. Like, even the weekend's going to be awesome. But I try and now really work on the mental side of things, because I think if you're too emotive, you can let things slip. So it's part of my sort of professional growth is making sure I don't get too emotive. And, like, especially on game day, if you're communicating with players or even being around players and staff, I think, you don't want any anxiety or emotion or wrong type of emotion to filter through to them. And somebody needs to be, sort of pan-faced and stoic a little bit as well, and make sure you're performance focused.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And of course, another good Marco man will be head coach of the team you're playing on the weekend, the Reds. You're playing the Reds. Brad Thorne, of course, a good Tasman man.
Yeah, and
a legend.
Kanye Kane Hames as well. After the game, he came up and gave me a big cuddle. I wasn't really in the mood for it, to be fair, in New Plymouth. But he's the scrum coach. But awesome to see Kane getting his teeth into that role as well. Because he's technically, obviously was a great prop in his day. And it's great to see them doing some coaching. So yeah, hopefully they've had their win for the year against us, and hopefully it is Brad's last game. But it's great to see those guys, obviously doing a good job and getting their team into the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, you got more excitement coming after the Super Rugby. A couple of weeks later, you're off to Japan with the All Blacks 15. That'll be a fantastic experience, no doubt. You had the similar one last year.
Yes, yeah, it'll be awesome. I get into camp the Wednesday after the final. Hopefully, I've had a busy week before that, so I want to be busy going into that week because we've obviously got to where we want to get to at the Chiefs. And it's been a bit of pre-planning. Like today's a day off for the Chiefs. I've done a little bit with the All Black 15, and Japan's a country that's growing. It's always had a massive following with rugby, but I think it's great to see them playing well on the field, and a lot of positive interactions with all the logistics people that I'm working with in Japan Rugby. And we're going to be in Tokyo for 10 days. So we play the Japan 15 in Tokyo first. And that's 2 weeks after the Super Rugby final. And then the next week we go to Kumamoto, which is down in the south of Japan, and play the Japanese Brave Blossoms. Hard to say quickly, but that'll be really cool. Really good for that next group of players. And I think that team's announced next Monday, with the All Blacks being named the day before, I think, on the Sunday night. So it'll be exciting to get another group of players in that next tier down from the All Blacks.
Oh, it'll be wonderful too. Noted that there'll be several players in your team challenging for berths in the World Cup side.
Yeah, I hope so. That's probably a motivation we haven't, we never talk about that stuff, but I suppose for those players, that's a motivation to play well for the Chiefs as well. Because if you get the job done there, just naturally that selection will hopefully follow.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Marty, all the very best for Saturday against the Reds, and my money's on the Chiefs to take out the title this year, so all the best, and enjoy your trip to Japan as well.
Thanks, mate. Always a pleasure to be on here, and we'll just take it 1 week at a time, and hopefully it's a special journey for the next 3 weeks.
I'm sure it will be. Thanks, mate. Much appreciated.